국방통신사 보도.
Overnight, North Korea tested a nuclear weapon for the first time since Kim Jong-un came to power. The underground test created shockwaves equivalent to a 5.1 magnitude earthquake at a mountainous site in the north of the country, not far from the newly Google-labeled nuclear test road. North Korea state television claimed the warhead was smaller and lighter than previous models, and although the claim may be exaggerated, the size of the weapon raises concerns about the prospect of an intercontinental nuclear attack, particularly following North Korea's successful satellite launch less than 2 months ago.
I strongly condemn Pyongyang's reckless act.
Condemnation came swiftly from the international community, and the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting this morning. The Post's Colum Lynch is at the UN. Thanks for joining us, Colum.
Thanks for having me.
Just 2 weeks ago, the Security Council passed a resolution saying that it will take significant action if North Korea stages another launch or a nuclear test. So what are they going to do now?
Well, they also said something similar 2 months ago. Essentially, the idea is today they passed a sort of a non-legally binding statement condemning North Korea, had general support from the China, Russia, everybody else on the Security Council. And what they said at the end of the statement was that they're going to immediately start intensive negotiations on a resolution that would take sort of appropriate measures. Susan Rice, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, told the press after the Security Council meeting this morning that they would seek some sort of new resolution that would augment the sanctions, tighten them. So I think that's the effort, but I think the real question mark is what China will allow and what the traffic can bear in the Council.
Do we have a sense whether China, as the most important player's position, has changed in the last 24 hours, or is this the same dance?
It's the same dance, and I don't think we'll really be clear until the coming days or weeks as to how far China is willing to go. It'll be worth watching to see if there are steps the Chinese take to kind of rein in the North and to make life a bit more difficult for them. But they also, there are a lot of Chinese companies that do business with the North, and they won't want to impede that business to a degree that it sort of harms their commercial interests. So it's a bit tricky, but I suspect that the Chinese are a little bit embarrassed. They have personally, repeatedly asked the North not to do this, and they've gone ahead and done this. So I think that there's probably going to be room for some greater pressure, but I wouldn't expect to see the Americans and the Chinese kind of really viewing this in the same way.
What's the next bit of information we're waiting to get out of the UN to know what, if anything, might be done there?
Well, I mean, the Security Council president, who this month is which is kind of interesting, is the South Korean foreign minister, today said that, essentially what they're going to do is immediately when they're finished with this meeting, they're going to start talking about what next steps are. And those next steps will be an effort to impose tougher sanctions on the North Koreans. They're going to immediately start negotiations with the Chinese and other council members to try and come up with a tougher resolution that will impose some sort of additional measures on the Chinese. But will all this lead to a kind of a breakthrough that gets North Korea to stop developing its nuclear weapons program? Probably not. But I suspect that they will try to make the cost a little bit more expensive than it has been.
Okay, Colum at the UN. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for having me.